Okay, so I realized that the only thing I learned today is something that's really difficult to explain, but because I have nothing else to talk about, I'm gonna have to do it. So today I learned how to solve a problem in physics that deals with centripetal force, where the centripetal force isn't a specific force, it's just a kind of force. So centripetal force is usually also the force of friction or something like that. But there can be cases where instead of being, because centripetal force is the force that pulls you towards the middle. So if there's something going around in a circle, I don't have paper to write this down and draw diagrams, so you're just gonna have to listen to me. If you're not an auditory learner, this will not help you at all. I'm sorry. But so centripetal force is just the force that pulls something towards the center when something's spinning. So usually that's friction, because the thing that keeps it from going straight off is friction, which helps it to spin in that circle. But there are cases where it's not friction, but it's a wall. So like if you're in a car and you turn really hard and you hit the wall, the thing that keeps you from flying out in a straight line and instead guides you down that turn is the wall. Or if you're on a gravitron ride, the spinning gravitron, the wall of the gravitron is what keeps you from flying out. It's what keeps you inside of the circular motion of the ride. I'm talking really fast. I'm sorry if you can't understand me. Everything about this is just a disaster. Okay. Anyway, moving on from there. So I learned to solve that kind of problem, a problem where the wall is what's keeping you held in place. So bear with me here because I'm about to get really technical. That means that the force of friction, which is holding you in place on that wall, is pushing up against gravity, because you're not falling down the wall, you're sticking to it. So that means that friction's going up and gravity's going down, and they're averaging out. So force of gravity is equal to the force of friction. So now to calculate the force of friction, you take the coefficient of friction, which is symbolized by a mu, and it just means like how good an object is at holding something, and you multiply that by the normal force, which means the force perpendicular to the direction of gravity. So if you're against the wall, the perpendicular force is the force hitting you this way, and if you're standing on the ground, perpendicular force is the force pushing down. So usually the perpendicular force is gravity. But in this case, because friction's going up against gravity, gravity is the parallel force. So the perpendicular force is the centripetal force, the force pulling you towards the center. So the way to solve these equations is to set it up so that you write force of friction equals force of gravity. Then you break it down to normal force times mu which normal force times coefficient of friction equals mass times the acceleration of gravity, because that's how you calculate gravity. Then you break that down to the coefficient of friction times the centripetal force equals the mass times gravity. And then you can break that down to the equation for centripetal force, which is mass times volume squared over the radius. And now it's getting really technical, and then you just eliminate your masses and you can solve it with whatever variables you're given, unless you're given mass, in which case it'll eliminate, so it's not important. But yeah, so I'm not going to get into the technical stuff of that, but that's the core of what I learned, was that centripetal force is the perpendicular force in a situation where the centripetal force is being caused not by friction, but by something pushing up by a wall. I hope you learned from that. You probably didn't. I'm sorry, that was really confusing. I didn't learn anything more easy to explain. I was racking my brain. I was like, I'm sorry. I was hoping I learned like a song lyric or something. I remembered that Elton John song is not "Hold Me Closer, I'm Tired of Dancing." It's "Hold Me Closer, Tiny Dancer." Or it's also not Tony Danza. What am I talking about? I'm sorry, just try to pretend you never saw this. I'm sure I just confused you all into like a deep coma.